Good afternoon, everybody. Happy solstice, and welcome back to the monastery. This is Nefer Sayu, the Righteous Shepherd. Today we're going to be talking about a Khemetic monk's perspective on homosexuality and pride. Like many of today's mainstream religions, Khemetism has also over the years become more and more progressive. For the most part, we are raised to be accepting, tolerant, and respectful of people of all religions, creeds, and regardless of their sexual orientation. However, it has been ingrained in me that somehow they might be lesser, only because they are living outside of the natural order. And yes, I know that this does happen in nature. I have experienced it before. However, even those animals that practice these sorts of behaviors are usually more outcast from the rest of them. And as you will see coming up, it isn't so much of the homosexuality part that's the problem. It's the pride part that's the problem. It's the excessiveness. It's the flash, and it's the selfishness. And we will go over a video that talks a little bit about another Khemetic monk's perspective and a historical standpoint on homosexuality, and we'll go from there.
Today's topic, because we're going to be talking about sexuality as it pertains to ancient Egypt. And so you might want to put your headphones on or take this one and wait to watch it someplace secluded in case you get walked in on. Don't want to cause anybody any embarrassment. And if you happen to be under 13 and you watch the Khemetic How-To Guide, for this episode, you might want to get an adult that you're comfortable with to sit and watch it with you so that if you have some questions, you have someone trustworthy you can ask. With that said, on to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Khemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian pagan and Khemetic practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Several viewers have asked about Egyptian religion and Egyptian society and homosexuality. And this is a very complex topic, but it's definitely one that's worth exploring. So let me give you a little bit of historical background and we can kind of work from there. A great reference on this topic is the book Private Life in New Kingdom Egypt by Lynn Meskel. This book, my one criticism is she's real heavy on the feminist bent, and it comes to the fore in her writing in several places. I kind of disagree with some of her ways of looking at that, but she directly addresses homosexuality and has some very, very interesting things to say about it in here. She makes some very good points, such as, number one, our idea of gay as an identity, as a lifestyle, is only about 100 to maybe 150 years old. Gay as we know it didn't exist in the ancient world because they did not see having same-sex desires or same-sex acts as making you a different kind of person. You could be just a dude, just a gal, but if you happen to have relations with a member of the same sex, that didn't make you a different, sort of person. And I'm going to add this observation. A lot of the social cues that we have that we think, oh, this means that someone is gay, didn't mean the same thing back then. For example, whether it's actually true or not, we tend to perceive men who are very concerned about their physical appearance as being gay. And lesbian women like masculine things. But in ancient Egypt, both sexes wore jewelry. Both sexes wore makeup. In fact, guys, may have even been a little more prissy about their appearance than the women. And you had goddesses like Neet and Sekhmet who were described in hymns as a woman who acts as a man. But there were also mother goddesses. So these social aspects that we consider to be markers of gay or not gay, those didn't mean the same thing back then. Now, did the ancient Egyptians count a third gender? You know what? Maybe. There is a particular word, and we find it in the execration texts. Those were texts from the Old and Middle Kingdom that were used to cast out, enemies. And the word that's used is saketi, and it's been translated differently by different scholars. The passage, you can read it in various books. It'll say all men, all women, and then all, depending on who the scholar is, you might see all eunuchs, all intersexed, all, effeminate men. It really depends on who's trying to translate the word, because we don't have it in enough context to really understand it. What we really need is to find more texts that use that word maybe in a different context so we can understand it better. So the jury's still out on what.
It sounds a lot like the word that Paul came up with to describe homosexuals in I don't remember which book it is, but I believe it was Paul. Maybe it was John. I'll have to double check that.
Whether or not there's a third gender. There might have been a transgender in ancient Egypt. What I think is interesting to note is that creator deities often are very androgynous. And Akhenaten, in particular, kind of explored that in some of the art that he had commissioned. So, there's nothing to say that there was not a third gender in ancient Egypt. As for the deed itself, the actual act, the Egyptians had a word, nick, and it was written with a determinative that you'd get in trouble if you drew it in school, but it meant penetration, and there was no negative connotation to that word. It was just there. But niku was a derogatory word for doing that to somebody, and a nekek was a man who had that done to him, and that was kind of you. You didn't want to be someone's nekek. And evidently, the Egyptians, in that regard, felt that it was better to give than to receive. But did the ancient Egyptians have same sex relations? Well, of course they did. They were human. And in fact, there is a Middle Kingdom story describing none other than King Neferkara going to the house of his unmarried general Sassanet. And the story says, after His Majesty did what he desired with him, he returned to his place. Now, what do you think they were doing late at night? And of course, let's not forget the contendings of Horus and Set, where Set tries to make Horus, his poor nephew, his nekek. Horus didn't enjoy it, but in one version of the story, it said that Set found it sweet to his heart. So obviously, he enjoyed that doing that sort of thing.
Okay, yes, Set would enjoy doing that sort of thing. A little side note about Set and the cult of Set. Um, Setiism or Setianism is the root of modern Satanism. It doesn't really glorify a deity, but it tries to promote self deification, self love, self respect, all of the sorts of things that you hear about today's modern day prideful people. They had a tendency to be arrogant and they had a tendency to be proud. They were almost akin to being atheists, but yeah, Satanism found its root here. True Satanism, Setianism. And yeah, look up the two different things and tell me that it doesn't sound the same. Satanism, Setianism, deification of self, glorifying self, a worship of chaos, live for the now, live for materialism. So, of course, Set would find this sweet to taste and sweet to his heart because he is the root of Satan. And what is Satan about? Confusion and lies, darkness, deceit, disorder, something being outside of the norm, something that is chaotic. Makes sense.
So, with those kinds of examples, and also references from the wisdom texts, how did the ancient Egyptians think about same sex relations? They seem kind of ambivalent because in the instructions of Ptahhotep, he advises against, and the book talks about this. He advises against having intercourse with the word used, the way it's translated is a man boy or a woman boy. the wording, there's probably some meaning there that we're not entirely sure.
In today's day and age, they would call them femboys or demi boys or demi girls, something that's as like an effeminate young male usually. So that's what they're trying to say.
Of, but he advised against doing it, and uh, it seems to me, at least, comparing that, you know, uh, uh, don't have sex with a an effeminate boy, and also one of the negative confessions in certain versions is I have not had sex with a boy. Um, my question is the objection because it's someone of the same sex or because it's a child? It sounds to me that to them it was more concerned about doing it with a young man who might have been under the age. They didn't have an age of consent, but maybe an age where he could think for himself. I don't know, but they did not have the kind of vehement religious objection to homosexuality that we have today. And part of that's because they didn't see a person who did that as, they're gay, they're not straight, In ancient Egypt, people didn't worry about, in the words of comedian Ralphie May, getting the gay, which people are afraid of doing now. They didn't have that kind of hang up.
And the thing that people always seem to forget about ancient Egypt and this liberal way of thinking in society and not taking that seriously is the fact that that civilization eventually fell because of that immorality. It's not around today. Some of our teachings are around and some of the texts are around, but the civilization itself did not last. And I can't help but think it's because they had such a loose outlook on such things. Because the people of the desert at the same time, the people of the desert, the people of the rivers, the ones that did not live inside the city, who didn't deal with government, they still clung to that man woman ideology. And yeah, we might accept and respect these sorts of people, but they would always be lesser because they are violating the natural order of what was intended. So yeah, they might not have cared, but you have to look at the fact that their civilization did not stand because of it.
And it may not have been considered the most upstanding sort of behavior in social circles. It was more desirable to have a wife and to have children because they were meant to carry on your legacy and to give offerings to you after you were gone. But that's that. I don't think they had any uh, serious misgivings about it on the level that a lot of people here do. And another thing to consider with in Egyptian families, you had a lot of different people in one household, and a lot of women. It's entirely possible, if you ask me, that you could have had women who had lesbian relationships, but they were living in the same house, and we wouldn't know about it because it wasn't like you have now, where two women go off and they get an apartment. Oh my God, they're living in sin. You know, how would you know? They're in the same house together with half a dozen other people. Privacy might have been another issue. Egyptian houses didn't have as many rooms as ours do, so how would you, get time? They probably went off, under the date palms or the someplace secluded in order to have relations with another person. Hopefully, this has given you some interesting information, some insight into how a very controversial topic might have been viewed in another culture. I think it's always interesting to learn about this because it gives us a little perspective on our own. And, what kinds of things do we have hangups about today that maybe weren't such a big deal in another point in time? So, for the Khemetic How To Guide, this is Sharon, wishing you Senepti.
So So as you can see, there was not really a lot of distinction of homosexuality in the ancient kingdoms. Now, I will say that, as my people have always said, there's the religion of the city, and then there's the rest of us. The people that lived in the desert, in the wilds, along the rivers, all of them, they were not really associated with city life. And, the city's always been progressive. The city's always pushed limits. The city's always been excessive. It's always been a sign of that. So the people and the tribes that avoided that as much as possible and just lived their rural farming lives, they were going to cling harder to traditions that had been passed down to them over thousands of years, even by that point, because these were lessons to come from people who had struggled, who had overcome adversity, and who had seen some things. And so those traditions were really, really highly regarded and really practiced. And that's how it is today. And at the root of it, it is almost biblical. It's like the Bible coincides and is truthful on these matters. And they say that, a man should not lay with another man. A woman should not lay with a farm animal or any other kind of animal, or there should not be any sort of adultery. Anything that's outside of God's will, anything that's outside of the natural order that takes you away from normal procreation. Even one of Mott's 42 negative confessions states, "I have not shied away from normal procreation." So that kind of, homosexuality does take you outside of normal procreation. And like I said before, it isn't so much the homosexuality part, it's the pride part, the pride in self. As I said before, Setianism, the root of Satanism today, is all about self-worship, self-deification, elevating oneself to be a god. Whereas the rest of us strive to live within God's will and within God's means, and to serve something higher than ourselves, to selflessly serve. And that's the same with, I think, Christians as well. They say, you have to pretty much abandon yourself, your love of self, in order to follow Christ's ways. It was much of the same for the old tribes of Kemet. So I hope that this video has been informational and gives you a different perspective from a different religion. I know that everybody knows the Christian perspective on this, and everybody pretty much knows the Muslim perspective on this. Well, this is the Khemetic perspective on this, at least from this tribe and the beliefs that we hold to, which idealize mostly the 42 negative confessions of Mott, the text of Mott, which means truth. And those are the examples to live by. And homosexuality just doesn't fit in with that. The main sin is pride. Homosexuality is a byproduct of pride. It's self-love, self-deification, putting yourself before something else, whereas the rest of us strive to put the Most High and other things above our own needs, and in return we get rewarded, and we live a really good life, free of anxiety, free of stress, just knowing a faith-based existence. And so to have pride is to have a lack of faith, and that's not what we're about. As this Khemetic tribe, we strive to live within the Aten's balance. So that's where we're at for today. Come what may, namaste. Don't let the bastards wear you down. Have a blessed day.